What kind of samples were you distributing? Hey there, I'm Elise and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm here to talk to you about how to write a Korean resume, or more like I'm going to tell you how I write my Korean resume. If you want to get a job here in Korea, it's just not realistic to think that you can turn in your English resume everywhere and get results. So while I'm not Korean, I have turned in my Korean resume to lots of Korean companies, from startups to corporations, and all I can say is I get callbacks and I get offers. And so since it works for me, I want it to work for you too. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more advice, stories, and peeks into my real life in Korea. If you haven't already, definitely check out my previous videos on job hunting in Korea. I tried to give an in-depth picture of things like getting a part-time job, getting an internship, and getting a full-time job. So I think watching them all together will really help you to prepare if you are interested in getting a job here in Korea. Alright, let's get real. Let's start by talking about what really differs between an American resume and a Korean resume. I'm American, so I'm going to talk about American resumes. I understand that there might be viewers from other countries with different styles of resumes that actually might be more similar to the Korean one, but I'm just going to compare American to Korean for the sake of this video. First, you'll notice that there's usually a photo in the upper right-hand corner. This is the standard in Korea, so much so that there are actually studios all over the place just for taking resume photos. And they are efficient. Like, they will have the shirt and the suit already there, so you don't even have to go dressed for taking a resume photo. They will dress you. And they actually have makeup and hair products there, so you don't have to plan, really. You can just walk in and take a resume photo. I didn't use their makeup and hair products because I don't want to share. But if you are just in a rush, you need a photo, you can just find a studio and they'll have everything you need. After they've taken your photo, they'll even sit with you to edit it together. They'll decide like what kind of things you want to fix, and they'll make you look perfect. And so some people actually come out looking completely different because they'll try to make you look like 100% symmetrical, but since you're sitting there, you are also a part of the process, so you can always tell them to stop. I actually told them to stop in some cases because like I didn't want to look like a totally different person. Nope. If you don't stop them, you might end up looking Korean. So you might be wondering, do I have to take this kind of photo? And my advice is, if you're in Korea, you definitely should. I think on a deeper level, it shows that you understand the Korean work culture and you are trying to fit into the status quo of Korean job hunting. So even though it may not be familiar to you, I think that you should take the photo in the studios to get the proper style of photo, and you should attach it to your resume. But let's say that you're not in Korea. You can always take the photo at home and just try to Photoshop it to look similar to what a Korean resume photo looks like, but definitely have the photo there because it's just such a norm here. I will include a link down below for where I took my resume photo, so if you are in Korea, I recommend going there. The price was really good, and I think the results are really good, especially for the price I paid. Like, some of the places are super expensive, but the results are all the same, so save some money. Moving on, let's talk about the upper section of the resume. This is where you'll put your personal information. On mine, I put obviously my name, my phone number, my email address, my home address, and I also put my LinkedIn. This is not really standard, I think, especially not in Korea, but I just can't fit all of my information onto one page anymore, and so I like to give my LinkedIn so that employers can look more deeply into my background if they want to. In this section, I also include my visa status. So for foreigners, one thing that I think really hinders them from getting a job, or can be very advantageous when they're trying to get a job, is their visa status. So if you have a good visa, or you're eligible for a good visa and just need a work contract to get it, I highly recommend that you include this so that you'll kind of have an easier time getting your foot in the door. And I forgot to mention at the start of this section that the personal information section is usually called 인적사항. But if you're writing this type of resume that I'm showing you right now, you don't actually need to label this, so I just skipped over. Next, a section that you do have to label is your education section, or 학력사항. This is also a very standard section, and you can pretty much follow the same format as an American resume. So you should include things like the name of your school, your major, the dates you attended and graduated, and the type of diploma that you received and stuff like that. I personally don't include my GPA anymore because I just feel like I'm old and nobody actually cares what my GPA was. But if you are fresh out of school and you don't have a lot of things to write on your resume to like boost your competitive edge, then maybe you want to include it. What's also very different about a Korean resume is that it's very common to include your high school, or at least it was. I don't know about what people are doing anymore, but if you're here in Korea, you'll basically get the feeling that like Korean companies used to be all up in everybody's business. Where did you go to high school, junior high school? Where did you brush your teeth? What? Who's your mama? Who's your daddy? What do? They want to know everything. But nowadays it's kind of changed, and so I don't remember seeing anybody's high school on their resume, but it's definitely there when you fill out the forms. Like they might ask you what high school you went to. I don't write it on my resume because one, nobody in Korea is gonna know my high school. I went to high school in America and it's not like it's super famous, so what's the point of writing it? And the other reason is I, again, try to stick to one page on my resume, and that's wasting space, so I just cut it out. No one's ever asked me later what high school I went to. Nobody's ever asked me why I didn't write my high school on there, so I think that you can really skip this. But if you want to follow the traditional Korean way of writing this resume, then you should also include your high school. Let's say again that you're someone who is maybe fresh out of school, or you just don't have a lot of work experience. You can also write your language programs here if you went to Korean language school or any kind of language school, but yeah, this isn't like set in stone, so just do what you feel. Next up is the meat of your resume, and this section is a lot less flexible. It's the work experience section, or 경력사항. So what I was told while I was going to grad school here in Korea is that there's really no set format for how to write this, so I just follow the American resume format. I put the name of the company, the position I held, the dates that I held that position. I put the general location, like the city and the country of the company or employer, and then boom, 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 I put the duties that I fulfilled. That part was easy. What wasn't easy was for me to write the duties the same way that a Korean person would write them, or like what is expected in Korea. I got so much feedback on this part of my resume of people telling me that I didn't write it correctly and that I just was missing information. So let's talk about that. What I think is the standard for a US resume is to kind of just write a summary of what your duties were. Like you kind of give a taste, and then you want to be able to give more details that the employer hasn't heard yet in the interview. If you put everything in the resume, what are they going to ask you about in the interview? But in Korea, you have to put every last specific detail into the explanation of your duties, and this for me was very hard to adjust to. So let's say for a US resume, you would have said something like, effectively drove up sales by introducing a sample distribution strategy to online shipping. But as far as I can understand from what Koreans are expecting to see in the resume, you've said almost nothing with that sentence. So let's say that you drove up sales, you effectively drove up sales. They want to know, how much did you drive up the sales? By what percentage? By how much money? Was this on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? What kind of samples were you distributing? Distributing. With what did you include these samples? Who got the samples? Like, you have to give the whole who, what, when, where, why. So all the numbers have to be there, and all the details you could possibly include on how you achieved those numbers also have to be there. So my recommendation is, if you're in school, definitely go to your career center and have them have a look over your resume. I had mine looked over so many times by my career center and also by just Korean friends, and I really got a lot of feedback about how I wasn't including enough detail. So I'm trying to give you that information now, but I really think that you should go have it looked at, because even if you think that you've included as much detail as you can, there's always going to be a Korean somewhere who can ask you why you left out this information, and then you will realize, oh, yes, I did. If you're not a student or you just don't want to bother your Korean friends, you can also visit some of the free career centers that are around Seoul, and I'll include links down below for those resources. Some of them free, some for a fee. Wow! So the last section in your resume is for the qualifications, and in my resume, I called this section 언어 및 능력. So language and 능력. I'll put a label somewhere in this video. So like in a US resume, this is where you'd put any certificates that you have or to list out the skills that you have. I divided mine into skills, languages, and hobbies. Unfortunately, and like I explained more deeply in previous videos, you can't really write just whatever you feel in this section. If you don't have concrete proof, then companies might completely disregard it, or they might make you take some kind of test to prove that what you said on your resume is actually a skill that you possess. So you can't say, for example, that you're proficient in a certain language if you haven't gotten some kind of certificate or license that also backs up what you're saying. I mean, you can. I'm not telling you not to write it. I'm just saying that if you write it and you don't have proof, then the company might not believe you. I've never had anyone ask me for a certificate for any of the things that I wrote in my resume, but there are companies that do. I have friends whose companies have asked them before. They did have to take tests to prove what they wrote, and so just know you better not lie. So I only wrote things that I had certificates for. I also went as far as to take LinkedIn courses just to make sure that I had some kind of certificate that said that I knew how to do the thing I said I knew how to do. I know a lot of people nowadays are taking Coursera courses, so even if you feel like you have a certain skill, even if you did it in your previous job, if you're able to get a certificate for it, then I recommend going ahead and getting a certificate so that you can confidently write it on your resume. Korea has a very much prove it or it didn't happen type of work culture, so better safe than sorry. The hobbies section is where you don't really have to prove it. I mean, how would you even? I don't actually include this on all my resume submissions. I usually just include it when I've heard that the company likes to hear that kind of thing. This is not really a Korea-specific resume tip, it's just a general resume tip, but sometimes you might end up having a hobby in common with one of the interviewers, or they might just be really impressed by your hobby. So if you heard that the company likes to hear it, if they asked for it, or if you just don't have a lot of things to write on your resume, then definitely include your hobbies because that could be a plus for you. All right, before I wrap this up, let's take a look at the form style Korean resume. The type of resume that I've been showing and what I use myself is known as 외국계 스타일 이력서, or foreign style resume. But for years, Korea was using a form of resume that looks more like a form. Supposedly, when you use the foreign style resume, that's supposed to be when you're applying to non-Korean companies, and the form type is supposed to be when you're applying to Korean companies. But I've been on the hiring side of things. Like I've never worked for a foreign company. I've only worked for Korean companies in Korea, and while choosing people to hire, I saw that even native Koreans were turning in the foreign style resume. And I don't know if that's because they were applying to my team and my team is the foreign team within the Korean company, but I think that it's really becoming more standard nowadays to use the foreign style resume just because you have much more room and flexibility to write all the points about yourself that give you a competitive edge. In the form style, because it's so form, there's really not a lot of space to write a lot of details about yourself. So let's talk about the work experience section. First, you would write the name of the company, then you would write your tigui, which in this case is not your title, it's your position. And this is all based on the more traditional Korean hierarchy system. So you'd write something like 사원, 주임, 대리, 과장, something like that. They want to know like how far up the ladder did you climb in your previous company. And because of the format, there's really not a lot of space to include a lot of sugary language to make yourself sound better. You really just have to stick to the facts and the like main points of your role. So you could only write something like responsible for strategic project planning. Good, that's it. So I think that's why people are leaning more toward the foreign style resume. I've never turned in the the form style resume willingly. I've only done it when companies forced me to do it, but that's the more traditional companies. Maybe more corporations will ask you for that format. Startups definitely should not. And yeah, I don't see it that much, so I don't really think that you have to go out of your way to prepare this type of resume. But it can come up, so I think you should be aware. With this new trend of using the foreign style resume, I really think that everyone out there should have a much easier time applying to jobs here than the foreigners of the past who had to struggle through this form. It's becoming less of a question of how you write the Korean resume and more of a question of, is your Korean good enough to describe all of your work history and then subsequently to do the job. So I hope that this video helps to get you started, and like I mentioned before, I'm going to include lots of helpful resources and also templates in the description down below. But of course, if you have any more questions on the things I covered in this video or any questions about general life here in Korea, feel free to leave me a comment down below. In upcoming videos, I'm planning on talking about things like the cover letter, the interview process, and so on. So definitely make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell so that you don't miss out on my next videos. As always, thanks for watching. Bye! 다음에 봐요!